Greetings, my name is Mars. I am host of the Watcher's Prophecy News only on www.kdov.us. We are America's best Christian radio station. You can find us here every Saturday night at 10 p.m. Eastern Time and Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time for our rebroadcast. You can also find us on TuneIn and Shoutcast under the search term KDOV Radio. Or you can come join us at our very, very private elite think tank, the Watchers Society, at Facebook under the search term Watchers Society. Our 20-year-old think tank on the end of days and the Lord's return will be very happy to have you. Now tonight we have the topic of alien disclosure tapes in our special event that will run overtime, so stay tuned. Let me first get some other things that are definitely on my mind tonight. Now I want to thank Jerry Harden for some of this devotional material. Now, I found that the Christian walk is much more and much deeper than I have ever dreamed. It is more than just prayer. Although prayer is essential, we are in a war with an enemy of ever-changing faces and tactics. It uses people to war on us. People think their thoughts are their own, and to some extent that's true. But the enemy also uses our thoughts and puts urges and suggestions to accomplish the devil's own ends. People do things without even realizing that they are just a pawn. Each person must choose their team, darkness or light. Unless I say, tuned into the light, I can be tuned into the bidding of the darkness. So keep charged up on the positive side. Keep your armor on. You are in a war. Stay ready. Keep your weapons honed. Ready and learn. Don't be ignorant. This will be a given quarter because you didn't know you'll be taken down. His aim is to steal, kill, and destroy, folks. Most people who call themselves Christians are that in name only. I've seen that. Their perception of God is like some big Santa Claus in the sky or some ethereal spirit entity that will send them to hell if they die, if they don't lead a perfect and holy life. None of us are perfect and holy, I'm telling you that. Yet they treat others like the world would treat people, insulting, name-calling, shunning, ignoring, basically hurting other people's feelings. And preachers unwillingly they're unwilling to preach the full gospel. The parts that may offend someone are graciously left out, regardless of what the very words of Jesus tell us in the scriptures. Some will only preach the happy parts, disregarding the negatives, such as what God has to say about homosexuality, fornication, bestiality, and the like, abortion, same-sex marriage. It makes me nauseous that some are so lily-livered that they won't even tell the people the whole gospel. Some are afraid their tax-exempt status will be revoked if they offend the government. So in reality, they just preach the cotton candy gospel. Then on Facebook, if you comment on someone's post, half the time you get verbally, literally ripped to shreds. Personal insults that people make are really atrocious. They'll say anything on Facebook that they wouldn't dare say to your face. And Christians argue over the strangest things that don't matter at all, like flat earth and all these other little points that don't really matter. What point is there that they believe the rapture will occur? What point is there when it's going to happen? You know what? No one really knows. And friendships are sometimes ended over things just like that. The timing of the rapture is of no consequences to a person's salvation. I'm just saying, neither is any of these other big conspiracies, Naruto, anything else that people just bring up and say, well, you're not a Christian if you don't believe this and don't believe that. Why not? Let's all make a compliment to be kind to others. And if that doesn't work, then let's just bow out of the conversation quietly. As for those apostate preachers, I want you to pray for them. People who hurt us emotionally just change who we refer to as friends. Picking a friend should be a thing that you do very wisely. Sometimes we put ourselves out there just begging for someone to step on our toes. In that case, perhaps we need to remove ourselves from the boxing ring. Most of all, I want you to read the Bible, read it for yourself, not solely depending on what someone else is telling you about what they think or believe, even myself. I want you to pray, I want you to praise, I want you to believe, and I want you to have faith, not only in God, but the faith of Jesus Christ. You know, you have to know how to use these weapons. Faith is the hardest to obtain for me because I know that it is the most important. All you have to do is that little mustard seed. Keep your eyes on Him and your ears and your heart on Jesus. Now, this is from a post by a gentleman named John McTarren. He recently posted about unleashing hell. And something that has come right out of Iran, I need to go ahead and tell you about this because it pertains to the things that are going on in our world right now. New Al-Qaeda magazine is describing in great detail how to start huge forest fires across the United States with instructions on how to make ember bombs. That's right, this was just posted on 11/29/16. Israel was just attacked by arson. We all seen that. This arson jihad. And now this massive fire in Tennessee that has come out of absolutely nowhere makes me wonder, because I know, I heard the scanners all night long. I only live 18 miles from the fires. And it was arson. Many of this was arson. And it is the jihad starting in America. Want you to remind yourself to be on the alert for people that are starting these fires and to report them, because we are not going to let our country burn. Fires that were just put out in Israel and now massive fires right here in America. It makes me think there is a jihad connection. There is. Al-Qaeda has called upon its followers to unleash these massive forest fires upon the United States and all throughout this entire summer. Now, published in the latest edition of the notorious terror magazine Inspire, there are graphic instructions for the creation and ignition of these ember bombs. So detailed, in fact, that it was even titled Ember Bombs. It is of your freedom to ignite a firebomb. That's what these Muslims believe. And the magazine encourages any would-be terrorists to target Montana because of the rapid population growth in its wooded areas. In America, there are more houses built in the countryside than in the cities, explained the writer known as the Al-Qaeda chief, according to ABC News. It is difficult to choose a better place than the forest of America or the valleys of Montana. Just letting you know, keep your eyes open everywhere. Can happen even in your neighborhood. And we've got some news. We're going to go ahead and get to this before we get to our main event. Now, there has been many grand events that have occurred in Bible prophecy on the world stage in just the last few days. One of these has come together and no one has even looked at it, has even seen it, and it's huge. It's big. Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan has announced that the only reason Turkish military forces have entered the northern part of Syria is to end the rule of the tyrant al-Assad. Now, he's publicly come out in saying that his forces are now against Assad. That has never been told before by the Turkish government. By publicly proclaiming that Turkey intends to use military force to overthrow the regime of Syrian President Bashar Assad, Erdogan has essentially declared war on the Syrian government. Of course, this puts a member of NATO in direct military confrontation with Russia, since Russia is working very hard to prop up the Assad regime. Folks, we are headed toward the big confrontation and the great deception. We're going to get into that. If all-out war breaks out between Turkey and Russia, Could that be the spark that causes this great war to come, the Gog War, to erupt in the Middle East? Once Turkey and Russia start fighting, wouldn't the United States and the rest of NATO be dragged into the conflict through Article 5? Big mainstream news networks in the Western world are almost completely ignoring what Indodrin said on Tuesday, but without a doubt, this is major news. The following comes from a Turkish news outlet. I want you to hear it firsthand and be aware that Turkey has now declared war on Syria. That's right. It has occurred already. Turkish military launched its operations in Syria to end the rule of President Assad. President Indodrin said November 29th. Now, he said this, and I'm going to quote him, "In my estimation, nearly 1 million people have died in Syria. These deaths are still continuing without exception for children, women, and men. Where is the United Nations? What is it doing? Is it in Iraq? No, we preached persistence, patience, but it could not endure in the end and had to enter Syria. We had to enter Syria together with the Free Syrian Army, the FSA, Dodrin said on the first Interparliamentary Jerusalem Platform Symposium in Istanbul. Now, Turkish military forces have initially invaded northern Syria on August 24th at a time we were all told that the purpose of the invasion was to fight ISIS. And of course, you know, their main little deal is to get rid of the Kurds. But now, Indodrin is telling us something completely different. Breitbart is one of the few U.S. news outlets that are reporting on this story. And I want you to read the following quotes from Indodrin that come from Breitbart article that was posted Tuesday very carefully. Understand, I am still a little under the weather. I'm recovering nicely. Thank everyone for their prayers for me. And let me continue on with this news. I get a little tongue twisted because I've got to get through most of this news really fast so that I can get to this main event, because I've got some news for you tonight that is really going to shake you to the very foundation and your belief system. Now, he said, Turkish president said, "Why did we enter? We do not have an eye on Syrian soil. The issue is to provide lands to the real owners. That is to say, we're there for the establishment of justice. We entered there to end the rule of the tyrant Assad, who terrorizes with state terror." Dodrin continued, insisting his forces were not in Syria for any other reason. He has declared war upon Syria. The Daily Shabbat notes that Indodrin spoke with Russian President Vladimir Putin about Syria during 2 telephone calls last week. In that, there were reports of screaming on the telephone. That's right, screaming on the telephone. To let you know, at world events, these leaders are screaming at each other. Since Russia has launched massive military operations to secure Bashar al-Assad in power, Putin would presumably have been interested in anything Indodrin had to say about toppling the regime in Damascus, and probably would not have kept quiet about it. If the Turkish military is only in Syria to end the Assad regime, then presumably they will stay there until the job is done. And right now, Turkey is amassing a huge secondary force to go inside Syria and continue the job. Believe me, Russia is going to react. This definitely puts Turkey into a direct military confrontation with Russia, Iran, and Hezbollah, since all three of them are already fighting very hard to help the Assad regime. Now, folks, our glorious leader, President Obama, who is on his way out, thankfully and gratefully, I'm glad that he is, and that we have someone sensible now taking the reins. But there is another reason why Turkey is in northern Syria, and that is there, as we know, to fight the Kurds. In fact, the Kurds in Turkey are both rushing to capture a little city northeast of Aleppo called Al-Bab, which is currently controlled by the Islamic State. There is a reason, because there's a big pipeline that goes through there. If they can control that pipeline, they can cut off a lot of strategic help for the Islamic State and use that oil to fund their own efforts. The intermediate challenge is securing al-Bab in Islamic State-held city northeast of Aleppo, which Kurdish-led fighters are racing also to take, and this city lies close to the front lines of Assad's allies. Now, right now, the big question for Obama is whether Russia will allow Turkey to seize al-Bab, said the Hezbollah brigade official that was recently on ABC News. And most of the people in the Western world don't know that Turkish soldiers are already dying in Syria right now. They're already taking heavy casualties. And that's even by the Russians. So they're already at odds, and that explains the screaming on the phone. Now, here in the United States, tens of millions of Americans are hailing a new era of peace and prosperity. In fact, it's even been called peace, safety, and security, which is a biblical statement, to say the least. Now that Donald Trump has won the election, but the truth is that one false move in Syria could easily raise the tensions between the United States and Russia to the highest level that we have ever seen since the Cuban Missile Crisis back in the 60s. And I'm telling you folks, Donald Trump has his work cut out for him. This is going to be a crisis. It's going to happen early, and Turkey is doing this because they're thumbing their nose at the United States and at NATO, trying to force our hand into things that we don't really want to do. And the reason for that is, of course, in the last couple of months, we had to remove, after this big uprising in Turkey, this overthrow of the government that they tried to do, we had to remove the nuclear weapons that we had there, the 90 plus nuclear weapons, and move them to Romania, which angered Russia even further. And Erdogan is doing this. If he would have just stayed out of Syria, we wouldn't be in such a precarious situation. But unfortunately, the president of Turkey is a narcissistic lunatic. And he dreams of a day when the old Ottoman Empire will once again be restored. And believe me, the influence of the demon Gog over Turkey is very much present in all of his actions, and it is leading Bible prophecy at this moment. His delusions of greatness are threatening to make the Middle East even more unstable than it's already been. In addition to his remarks above, on Tuesday, Erdogan called on all Muslims globally to embrace the Palestinian cause and protect Jerusalem. This was basically the very same call that the imams in Iran had given to start fires there and burn Jerusalem to the ground. So you see, there is a lot of conflict in the world going on. Donald Trump is going to have to tackle right away. Now, Turkish President Erdogan has urged these Muslims to defend the Palestinian cause, and it's taking a very tough stance on Israel despite the so-called, quote, improved ties between the two nations. Basically, that is because Erdogan can't really afford a war with Israel at this time when he's busy with his little army in Syria. And soon he'll likely be fighting the Russians, dragging us deeply into the conflict. The president of the majority Muslims in Turkey said Tuesday that it is the common duty of all Muslims to embrace the Palestinian cause and protect Jerusalem, and that safeguarding the Al-Aqsa Mosque should not be left to children armed with nothing but stones. Located in the old city of Jerusalem, the hilltop compound is sacred to Muslims and Jews. And what I thought was very funny in this is he lit a cigar with a match, and he held the match right to the camera. Thought that was very interesting, and to me, that was a signal that Turkey is supporting the burn in Israel. People need to know this. It is important. Most people in the Western world pay very little attention to Erdogan, but the truth is that he is a madman, and that's often referred to as Turkey's version of Adolf Hitler. He's extremely ambitious, extremely nationalistic, and he is definitely a warmonger. It is a very dangerous combination, and I believe that it's only a matter of time, in my opinion, before he starts a major war in the Middle East. That's coming from my own military mind. Someone needs to get this guy under control. But unfortunately, the Obama administration is very, very hesitant to confront Dodrin about his outrageous behavior. He just doesn't want to say Muslim extremist. Even the latest thing in Ohio, the killing was done by Muslim. And no one's admitting it except Donald Trump. And believe me, I do believe that Donald Trump will do something about it. When Dodrin openly stated that the Turkish military is in Syria to overthrow the Assad regime on Tuesday, it was an all-out declaration of war, screaming on the phone. I guarantee you was the declaration of war. That was like lighting a match in the room that has already been doused with gasoline. So, folks, be aware. World conflict is on the horizon. Now, I've got some other news, and this is kind of prophetic, and people don't really understand. God does things in his own time. God does things in his own way. Donald Trump will be 70 years, 7 months, and 7 days old. Think about that. 77 and 7 on his first full day in office. Now, you cannot tell me that is not some kind of divine consequence. I'm going to read to you a little bit in Galatians that will continue to expand your understanding of the forthcoming show that I have for you tonight. Foolish Galatians, quoting out of the Bible now, who hath bewitched you that you should not obey the truth, for whose eyes Jesus Christ have been evidently set forth crucified among you. This only would I learn of you, received ye the Spirit by the works of the law, or by hearing of faith? Are ye so foolish, having begun in the Spirit, ye are now made perfect by the flesh? Have ye suffered so many things in vain, if it yet be in vain? He therefore that ministereth to your spirit and worketh miracles among you, doeth it by the works of the law, or by the hearing of faith. I want you to keep that in mind. Folks, in the days ahead, only spreading the word will be worth living for. As war is still coming like a freight train. And although you think we may have had a reset, let me just tell you this. And this is a little bit of prophecy of my own. You can take this with a grain of salt. My mother, everybody's mother, they believe their own mother is a saint, and I believe that of my own mother. She was a saint to me, and she prayed very hard about many things. She wasn't a prophetess. She didn't prophesy very much. She never said a lot of things about world events. She wasn't really interested, but she did tell me, she said my name, that I'm not going to live long enough to see these things, and she didn't. But in your lifetime, son, you're going to see these things happen. Now, we know with Donald Trump, we may have had a prayer reset because many Americans in this country prayed, and we needed that little extra time to spend with our families to try to turn our nation around. Pray for our leaders, like I've been saying, and many people did, and I do believe that the Lord listened and gave us a little bit of a reprieve. But as you see, Trump will have a lot on his plate really soon. It's not going to be a long one because Trump already has world issues that must be faced, or we will see a war like we've never seen, and it will come in our lifetime. The 1948 generation will not all pass away, and they're almost all gone before you're going to see these things from fire to brimstone and beyond. Now, Turkey has always been a big part of the Middle East and Middle Eastern events, as the Turks are a unique breed of people. In biblical times, before Jesus walked the earth, Turkey held the seat in Satan in its borders. And as you know, many angels fallen and not were appointed various seats over various nations. Evidently, Gog, one of the demonic spirits, was appointed as told in the Bible, who is the head prince of that nation. And he has a job. He has a job to do. That spirit of Lucifer has a influence, and it runs very deep and very wide. Apparently the players on the world stage are being played now by the New World Order and the government elites in provoking this World War III in the Middle East region, and we see that daily on the Watcher Society. Want you to become a member. Look us up on Facebook, the Watcher Society. It's not hard to find. Several different things called Watcher Society. We have a store. We have many other things. Look for our main site. You'll find it. Bible prophecy is being fulfilled at a very rapid pace. And those that ignore it are just playing ostrich. It's piling up more and more and more worldly things that will become absolutely useless in the not too distant future. What good's a television with no power? Most of you aren't even prepared for a power outage, let alone things so dire that you can't even describe the terror. Look at the trapped ones in the fires in Gatlinburg. Most had adequate warning but waited, and they were not prepared. They weren't. They were not prepared when trapped. They suffered. Some died because they did not know what to do. Knowledge is power. And at the Watchers Prophecy News, we provide the power of knowledge. I see it every day, and it breaks my heart deeply that folks are too blind to see the truth. Time, energy, and lots of money is wasted for the lust of this world. Sad, but it's true. Sure, it's nice to have some nice things. If you work hard, you deserve them, but soon vanity will kick in, and you'll have to show the world yourself and everyone else your real will to survive anything and to have a real purpose in life. If you're one of the lucky ones to even survive what is coming, this coming great war. People don't believe it, but it's coming. You have to remember that the fix is in. The dupe is up, and folks must come to grips that the powers that be have been playing mind games with all of you, mostly on Facebook. And as a reminder, I don't want you to fall for them. I see all my friends, they fall for all these mind games, and it's ridiculous. They just do not understand the grand plot. And I'm going to expose a little bit of that right now. The ones that you will see that post to say things like, what ammo is best for home defense? When you answer, you just told them what guns you have and what you would use in the middle of the night should they come a-knocking. I don't want you to fall for any of these kind of proliferating posts. The what is your favorite color? Or how many hours do you work a day? Or anything that gets you to tell about your life, your times, your habits. Don't go telling them anything. None of their business. You click on these kind of posts, you just think that, well, everybody else is doing it. What harm can it be? You see, all that you type on Facebook goes directly to the Utah data center through Prism. Yes, that pesky thing is still operating. It's still working. It's working to dissolve your rights into a eternal database just for the usage of the New World Order. Now, I get so frustrated when I see posts that say many of these things like, what is the name of your friends that would kill for you? Yes, I've even seen that on Facebook. So I want you to be very careful. All right, we're going to shift gears now and get into the deeper meat of tonight's show. And this is definitely for mature audiences because some people will definitely not agree, but those of you that understand what is really going on will see the light kick on in your own mind. I'm here to tell you the truth. UFO conspiracy theories argue that evidence of unidentified flying objects and extraterrestrial visitors is being suppressed by various governments and politicians globally, most notably the officials of Washington, D.C. Such conspiracy theories commonly argue that Earth's governments, especially the government of the United States, are in some form of communication and are cooperation with these extraterrestrials. They're not extraterrestrials, by the way. It's a ruse. You see, they've had a long time in the pit to think about what kind of plan that they could use versus us. What a better way to do it than to make us believe that the ones that did come, that may have been real extraterrestrials, the ancient ones, the ones who may have visited us legitimately from other places in space that God created, are just here, and that these new sightings, these new things are just the same as the old ones. That is not true. Despite public claims to the contrary, and further what some of these theories claim, that the governments are explicitly allowing even alien abductions. We got to that on previous shows. And I want you tonight to know that it's true. It's all true. At least the part they want you to see. Most of you know the drill, the hysteria, the alien figures now sold worldwide, all depicting the same kind of large-headed, black-eyed alien I've told you about. Many shows. You know, and I've said this many times, because it stunned me when I first read it about the Mark research poll that showed that every home in the world, from Japan to Australia to United States to New Zealand, everybody had about 11 of these aliens in their own home. That's right. You're saying, oh, I don't have any aliens in my home. You do. You just need to look around. Think I'm kidding? From pictures on notebooks, little aliens on pencils, figurines, keychains, stickers on your refrigerator, computer images, lunch boxes, it's all there. We all know what these things look like. But how did we get here? Was this all part of the deception? That's what we're going to cover tonight. So we're going to start with a little history on this, but I'm going to move along very fast because I want to get to the meat of this. See, in the 1940s, there was a man named Donald Kehoe. He started investigating flying saucers for True magazine. Kehoe was one of the first significant conspiracy theorists, and he asserted eventually that the saucers were from outer space and were on some sort of scouting mission. Now I'm going to stop right there and get into this. When I was growing up as a child, I had fairly strict step-parents, and they were interesting people. They were very much God-believing Christians, and I had gotten a book from the school library, Von Daniken's first UFO book, Chariot of the Gods, and I was questioned immediately when I brought it to dinner one night. My stepsister looked at me real funny, and my uncle and aunt looked at me real funny, and they said, what have you got? That is demonic. Why are you even reading that crap? And I said, well, I'm doing a book report on it because I don't believe it either. And I even took this knowledge with me to church, and I talked to the pastor about it. And I told him what I believed, and he told me the same thing. He said, you're right. Don't believe that because it's all fakery. It's all trickery. It's all deceit. It's all deception. And as I dug into this as a young man, I become fascinated with the ideas of these things, and I wanted to know more. I wanted to know how we were being deceived. I wanted to know why we were being deceived. So Mr. Kehoe, he claimed to derive his theory from his contacts in the Air Force and Navy intelligence, and I've checked out his contacts. Every one of these people are legitimate. Just can't find a flaw in this man's research. Now, Project Sign, it was based at a Air Technical Intelligence Command at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, and its successors, Project Grudge and Project Blue Book, were officially tasked, many of you have heard of these things, with investigating the flying saucers. Edward Ruplett's book, The Report on Unidentified Flying Objects, reports that many people within these research groups did in fact support the hypothesis that the flying saucers were indeed from outer space. Now, we're going to skip back to my childhood right here. I'm going to stop and interrupt this. And tell you that my own mother, a lot of people don't believe when their family tells them something. They go, well, did you really see this, or was that really so? But when it comes to your immediate family, like your mother, your brother, your sister, your father, you just stop and shake your head and go, well, I know you, and I know you wouldn't lie to me. And most of her brothers and sisters, my mother come from a rather large family in southeast Arkansas, and she, as a child, seen a UFO literally come down on their own farm, and many of my aunts and uncles tell the same story. And I can't all say, hey, you're all lying. They seen something. Many of you have also seen things. I'm not going to say they're all fake, because they're not. They are part of the deception. They are part of the things that these entities are doing to claim a tiny spot in your mind, and I'm going to explain exactly what they're doing to you here shortly. Now, Kehoe claimed that he derived this theory, as I said, from Air Force and Navy intelligence, and as I said, I checked out all of his sources. I couldn't find anybody that he had talked to that was not 100% legitimate. Now, notable persons that have publicly stated that UFO evidence is being suppressed are some very well-known figures, including Barry Goldwater, Admiral Lord Hill Norton, former NATO head and chief of the British Defense Staff. This man would have known. Brigadier General Arthur Exon, former commanding officer of Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, on his deathbed confessions. Vice Admiral Roscoe H. Hillenkotter, the first CIA director, on his deathbed confessions. Astronaut Gordon Cooper and Edgar Mitchell, and former Canadian Defense Minister Paul Heller. Add to that all the previous testimony I've shown you in previous shows on this subject. Even Richard Nixon, I told you about him last show. Jackie Gleason connection, told you about that on my last show. And that alone was a shocker, but oh dear listeners, I have more. Every one of these have come out with deathbed confessions about the truth of these demonic alien creatures and their hidden agenda. We're going to get to that, because I want you to know you're not going to be deceived. You're going to learn the truth. You're going to learn it right here tonight. This leads me into a bigger part of this show, that how they have been able to accomplish these things so that no one would really see the big picture. They would just get all these little fragments, so that when the deception come together, you would have that aha moment and go, oh, well, I believe now. Hold up your little sign, welcome aliens. Well, folks, I'm going to tell you, don't do that. They have misled you, and they have done this in a sensitive, compartmentalized way where information, and I've had much of this information confirmed from my own military sources, and it started when I was doing my last UFO show here on KDOV, and it linked back to much older shows that I've done on other networks about aliens. It's come to light in a very serious topic tonight, because I've had a lot of requests for this, full alien disclosure. In fact, we all know it's really demonic, and Satan's plan to pull off the great deception in human history, and Werner von Braun admitted the plan for the world on his own very deathbed, and that's the focus of tonight's show. We're going to get to that, and now let me lay out the groundwork, and I've done my homework here, but during Operation Paperclip, the following FOI request has been done over the years about such things. Many know of the operation, and those that don't, this is about the time, 9 October 54, we were able to find and break one of the things from Roswell that Werner von Braun and others who were brought over here in Operation Paperclip to make it seem where it started out harmless enough just to build rockets for the United States instead of for Hitler. But soon it became a very confusing act where many were working on so-called alien technology and back engineering these craft and disseminating their technology to the populace while keeping the real prize for themselves. That's right. That's about the time the globalists, such as the Rothschilds, came in to the picture with their satanic row to fulfill, using the entire scheme as it was revealed to them by demons in their little ritualistic things that they do at their Bilderberger meetings, to perpetuate globalism and the eventual takeover of all governments. And I'm going to detail just exactly how that happens in a few minutes. I'm going to discuss that and more. I want to first inform you the best I can about the cover-up. And it's deep. There's so much here that I can't possibly get to it in the time I have, but I'm going to share with you what I have. Now, Canadian radio engineer Wilbur B. Smith, let's start there. He worked for the Canadian Department of Transport. He was interested in flying saucer propulsion technology, and he wondered if the assertions in the just published Scully and Kehoe books were actually factual. So in September of 1950, he and the Canadian Embassy in Washington, D.C. arranged contact with a senior U.S. official to try to discover the truth of the matter. Now, I've got some disclosure on that. And it's part of the things that Hillary Clinton wanted to say. We're going to get into that too. Yeah, Hillary Clinton's involved in this. Smith was debriefed by Dr. Robert Starbacher, a physicist and a consultant to the Defense Department's Research and Development Board. Now, as I alluded to, that Smith was briefed by Dr. Robert Starbacher, a physicist and consultant to the Defense Department's Research and Development Board. Other correspondence having to do with the Kehoe needing to get clearance to publish another article on Smith's theories of UFO propulsion systems and work related to that indicated that Bush and his group were operating out of the Research and Development Board. Smith then briefed superiors in the Canadian government, leading to the establishment of a project, top secret, called Project Magnet, a small Canadian government UFO research effort that has been much more forthcoming than the United States government. Now, these Canadian documents pertaining to Operation Magnet and Smith's private papers were uncovered in the late 70s, and by 1984, other alleged documents emerged claiming the existence of a highly secret UFO oversight committee of scientists and military people everyone has heard of, called the Majestic 12. Again, naming Berner and Bush. And Starbacher was also interviewed in the 1980s and collaborated the information in Smith's memos and correspondence even on his deathbed throughout the 1950s and early 60s. Smith granted a lot of public interviews and, among other things, stated that he had been lent crashed UFO material for analysis. This is classified, now unclassified by FOIA request through the U.S. government, but documents that were obtained by the Canadian government. And this was done by a highly secret U.S. government group, which he would not name these requests. Now, Smith is one of those who did get access and heard the von Braun deathbed confession tapes. And I'm going to let you have some of those before the show is out. You're going to hear it from the German scientist's own deathbed confession. A few weeks after the Robertson panel, the Air Force issued Regulation 200-2. That should not really spark any mental triggerings, but you have heard that it orders airbase officers to publicly not discuss UFO incidents, and that they could, if they were judged to have been solved as hoaxes, swamp gas or whatever, and to classify all the unsolved cases to keep them out completely of the public eye. This was a grand admission through FOIA that the United States government was indeed hiding things related to UFOs. Okay, so we've got that out of the way. We know they're hiding something. We know there is a conspiracy here. That's plain and simple. In addition, the UFO investigative duties started to be taken on by the newly formed 462nd Air Intelligence Squadron, AISS, of the Air Defense Command. All of these things and thousands of other things like it all lead up to what started this demonic deception that yet again we have another deathbed confession for, that namely of Wernher von Braun. So let's get on that trail and let's see where that goes. Now, as we know, he come over here through Operation Paperclip. It was the United States Office of Strategic Services, the OSS program, which more than 1,500 Germans, primarily scientists, but also engineers and technicians, were brought to the United States with different specialties from post-Nazi Germany for the government employment, starting in 1945 and increasing in the aftermath of World War II. And there was a mission behind this, and it gives rise to this increase of technology that we've earlier discussed. It was conducted by the Joint Intelligence Operations Agency, the JIOA, and in the context of bludgeoning Cold War, one purpose of the Operation Paperclip, in fact, was to deny these German scientific expertise and knowledge to the Soviet Union and to the United Kingdom. That's right. As well as to inhibit post-war Germany from redeveloping its military research capabilities in the secret bases that we had not conquered by the end of the war, those notably in Antarctica, and we got to a lot of that in our last show, so you can go back and see show 31 on my YouTube archives and get a great deal of information by listening to that. Now, by comparison, the Soviet Union were even more aggressive in recruiting these Germans. During Operation, and I'm probably going to murder this, Oslo-Varium, Soviet military units forcibly, at gunpoint, recruited 2,000 plus German specialists to the Soviet Union during one night alone. So the Soviets were very interested in this so-called, quote, alien technology and how they could use it for their military just as much as we were. In the JIOA's recruitment of German scientists in this FOIA request, we started to see the Allied victory in Europe occur. It occurred on May 8, 1945, but the U.S. President Truman did not formally order the execution of Operation Paperclip until August of 1945. Now, Truman's order expressly excluded anyone found to have been a member of the Nazi Party, and more than that, anyone who was a nominal participant even in its activities, anything that had to do with Adolf Hitler and the Nazis. Truman said he didn't want anybody recruited over here to work on our rocket program who was an active supporter of Nazi militarism. However, these restrictions would have rendered ineligible most of the leading scientists, including von Braun, whom the JIOA had identified for recruitment, among them these more famous rocket scientists, and as well as many of the physicians like Hubertus Stronghold and Kurt H. DeBus. You can look up some of these people, Arthur Randolph, each earlier classified by Truman as a menace to the security of Allied forces. Now, let's get into just a little bit more of this before I change gears. The JIOA worked independently to circumvent President Truman's anti-Nazi order, and this was done primarily by the upcoming and formed military-industrial complex that Eisenhower and Truman had warned us about that was forming, and the Allied Potsdam and Yalta agreements, creating these false employment and political biographies for all of these scientists through Operation Paperclip. The JIOA also expunged the scientists' Nazi Party memberships and regime affiliations from all public records. Once these things were bleached of their Nazism, the scientists were granted brand new security clearances by the U.S. government to work in the United States, and indeed they did, and they seen way too much. We're going to get into that too. We know even from the election this year for president that even Hillary Clinton, let's get into that, knows and threatened to tell everyone in the John Pacetta emails where she was told not to say a word as they would kill her. That's what she was told in these emails. And if she wanted real trouble, she needed just to open her mouth a little bit wider about what she knew. And she mentioned these aliens. Yes, even Hillary wanted to win the election so bad that she even discussed on her own server that was hacked, by the way, the existence of this plan and these creatures with John Pacetta. Now, she wanted to give full disclosure to the American people, and I'll give her credit for that, but not for anything else. She deserves a prison term, in my opinion. Had many shows ranting on her. You can go back and listen to those. This stems from things that goes back all the way to 1956. And you can see the publications of books like Gray Baker's They Knew Too Much About Flying Saucers, the book in which publicized the idea of these sinister men in black figures who appear to UFO witnesses and warn them to keep quiet or else they will be killed. Same thing was told to Hillary Clinton. Even she is not completely untouchable, apparently. Men in black have her number. There has been continued speculation that the men in black are government agents who harass and threaten UFO witnesses. That indeed is real, and the highest level of compartmentalization that can be had is in effect for this deception. I assure you of that through my own research. Now, to make a long story short, I was able to get a hold of the transcripts of Werner von Braun's deathbed tapes in transcript form. All of these are real, and I have them right now in my possession, about 40 pages. And folks, I can't possibly get through all this tonight, but in the entire world, I have heard about these things over and over again, and I'm about now to expose many of these that are going on, and I hope that it awes you into a new dimension, a new paradigm, and it reshapes your thinking about these aliens and demons. This is part 1 of a part 2 series, so I want you to all come back for next week's show and hear more of what I have to tell you on these things. Next show is not going to run as long as this one, but if I go over tonight, just bear with me. Look, I'm not running for mayor of Crazy Town. I'm not running for mayor of Crazy Town. I'm not running for Tinfoil Hat Radio. I have real information, and I'm going to try to disseminate it, but it's vast. This is big. This is huge. It's mind-ripping stuff, and they don't want you to know. Wonder if the men in black will come knocking on my door. I want you to know, because then they cannot deceive you. And we can only have so much time here, so I'll try to get to the meat of this as best I can tonight. There are lots of entities involved, from Boeing Skunk Works, Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, AC&G, Nillis Range, and others who have all very compartmentalized this business, where parts, just tiny parts of certain technologies were disseminated, and these are staffed with long-timers who are in the know about such items that come down the pike, fully implemented, ready to integrate technology. And all of this is done through back engineering of these so-called crashed flying saucers. You even have some of this technology, I guarantee it, in your home today. Now, in reality, what really happened, well, they crashed because we took those craft out ourselves. This is a quote from von Braun on his deathbed, using a early pulse radar system. This time it was a new technology. It was man-made, and it is archaic now. It was a early form of radar, but the technology of the day, and that was very backwards. But for the aliens, these demons, these demonic spacecraft, the demons who have this end-time technology, we know that from the Bible, that they have end-time technology. All you have to do is read the book of Ezekiel. You can clearly see that they never knew what hit them. They just didn't. You honestly think that it was pure coincidence that the Roswell crash happened right at the very place where we were testing nuclear physics and bombs to the very limit of our technology of the day? No, it's not a coincidence. This monopulse radar was found to take these aliens down. It made their spaceships crash. And we immediately capitalized on that. These craft have said to have flown through interstellar space, yet you tell me as soon as they come to Earth they can't fly in our atmosphere? Come on. They suddenly can't navigate and they crash. It was a fluke, but von Braun said you can't trust them. He said that on his deathbed, meaning the aliens were not human. They were, quote, something else. That's what von Braun said. They were something else. Jackie Gleason seen them. You heard in my previous show what I had to say about that. Now, in the 40s, there were not just Roswell, but multiple crashes, multiple retrievals, and some of these craft are very, very advanced. And we were using the same pulse radar technology that could disable them and cause them to crash, and we did this dozens of times, thinking that we were doing something. This was all by design, folks. They knew the flaw in their own systems. This was by design. Von Braun said, now they were deceived. They thought they were actually shooting them down with this radar, but that wasn't actually the case. We'll get to that as well. Von Braun said there were about 9 of these craft, some of them underground in a secret base. Guess where? Near Tombstone, Arizona. That's right. Go look on the map. There's an area around Tombstone, Arizona that Google won't even, Google Maps from space won't even show you. It's all blacked out. Wonder why. This is a fact. It's not fiction. But if you ask, well, Mars, how do you know? It's what you have to believe. You see, if I tell you what I know, you're only asking for proof. Proof is easy. Yes, it lurks around in the shadows, and you have to chase it and pin it down. But for you to believe, to really believe, it takes faith. And faith, that's something that you have to work at, just as the scripture in Galatians that I quoted earlier. Now, as you and I both know, there is indeed a shadow government. The military-industrial complex is integrated and compartmentalized. I've used that word several times. It is so that so tightly that the left hand doesn't even know what the right hand ever does, except at the very top levels of government and some secret societies that were given this information by former leaders like George Bush, that they covet as proof of their own demonic thinking, such as the Masons, Skull and Bones, just to name a few. But I'm a little off topic, so let me shift back to the point. The devil and his angels rely on this end times technology to make them seem invincible and pull the wool right over your eyes, because you've been educated with this tech just enough to know that this is just a bit above your pay grade. And with that comes who can stand versus this man, the Antichrist that's in the Bible, who will use this demonic end days tech not only to install himself into power after the Gog War as the so-called aliens stop the war mid-stride after millions are dead, and when you see them all in the sky as the savior of mankind, you will believe. That's right. They're here not to only deceive mankind, but to usher in the deception that I'm here to tell you about in the von Braun deathbed confession tapes. Now, von Braun spoke much of this in German, where then on occasion he would break into English the entire transcript I have, and some of the more audacious aspects of what I'm presenting right now in this series I want you to hear. I've explained before on other shows how human tech, real human tech, has increased in very small incremental amounts at about 2% a year since the time of Christ. That's true. Go look it up. But he made it clear that one of the things that we could look forward to in his second coming in the days before was that in those end days that tech would explode. And since the Civil War, tech has went to about 16 to 18% a year and doubles now about every 5 months. Some of the things we learned from Roswell are so astounding in technology that you think you know things, but really you're just at the level of wow. And hey, it works. I push a button, it starts, it works. Who would ever think the horseless carriage would have a computer? You just don't know. Now, I have a EET in electronics from DeVry myself. And in my day, we worked with chips and circuit boards we made ourselves, masking by hand and drilling, making our own circuit boards. Industry come up with a mass way to do this called silk screening. And the level of tech that we now use is really not even on that scale. It's really totally different. Really did not even know how to decipher some of these things. We now have to... I'll tell you what, first let me go into the deception. Let me awe you with what this stuff is so you can actually see the layers of technology. It's so vast that your head just explodes with it due to the potential applications in a wide variety of mass-produced electronic devices that in reality meant to further the education of mankind at a unnatural rate. The Bible says that. In other words, a rate that is beyond the rate that man would have come up with these things on his own, and it's all part of the deception. They have to get you up to speed so that you can not be some native who worships a Coke bottle that fell from a jetliner in the middle of Africa, but instead a well-rounded, informed human that can be deceived. And many companies have said the compartmentalized areas that are given tech and shown how to produce it. I can prove that. The military-industrial complex has been very well analyzed and warned against. We all know the warning that Eisenhower gave. That warning is just as true today, even more so than it has ever been. What they are perpetuating on the American public as well as all over the world. They have received funding and technical support from the sale of illicit drugs to the humankind, and the major amount of the support from the highest compartment in the chain above the military-industrial complex, above the president, above the rulers of this earth, but from Satan himself. This preparation work is for the deception. These things given to a number of other manufacturers such as DuPont, Displays, and Philip Components. You just don't think that it's there, but it is. It's in your home. They have established relationships with Walmart and many of the other United States Department of Defense civilian contractors, the Gillette Company, Hewlett-Packard, IBM, Unisys, VeriSign, Dublin, Manhattan Associates, Microsoft, the Kennedy Group, Natasha Corporation, NCR Corporation, Zebra Technologies, and Pexar, just to name a few. This technology is expanding, and no one really understands even how their wristwatch is working nowadays. Some of this tech is so advanced, it makes itself. And it's in the stores you're about to buy at Christmas. You know the old saying, for the man who has everything, get him technology. Can't go wrong with tech. Such things that make themselves right out of the Roswell crash and other recovered spaceships. Now we know how to shoot them down, or did. Does it work anymore? And even that was a fluke. All pre-planned, as I said, even a small sacrifice for our own demise, as I will explain here in a moment. just to describe to you this new technology that is already out now in the marketplace in Walmart and Target. It's mind-blowing, but for what we have, they have things that will make you shiver in your bed at night. Example, and I'm not going to get too technical, but I want to show you what I mean. They now have this thing going on in technology. Like I said, you're buying it for Christmas. It's called fluidic self-assembly and screen printing of nanoblocks. Now that sounds a little complicated, but in this process, specifically shaped nanoblocks, that's right, nanotechnology, integrated circuits, ICs, that means hundreds of thousands of transistors, called MOSFETs, metal oxide field effect semiconductors, entire chips worth, and each chip has tens of thousands and some even more millions of circuits. These nanoblock ICs flow through a liquid solution and are distributed across a thin flexible film. Now, as I said, this technology is so advanced it literally builds itself into new shapes and new forms of technology, things that we don't even know what we're making. The high-tech computers of the past are nothing compared to this. The laptops that you currently have are nothing compared to this technology that is now hitting the market. The surface of this film is shaped micro-embossed receptor holes into which the ICs settle. That's right, they're pushed into this liquid and they settle down into these pre-shaped receptor holes. They're pre-shaped. The shape of the ICs and the corresponding holes are such that all the ICs fall into place and they self-align, hence making a completely new circuit, hence the term fluidic self-assembly. After the nanoblock ICs have been placed in the substrate web, straps are made using the screen printing techniques to create large contact pads of conductive ink with electrical connections to the ICs. This stuff is just mind-blowing. Huge supercomputers with real artificial intelligence that simulate the human brain and other things are not just possible, they're being created. And other things being made right now that comb the web with web spiders, that look for traces and patterns of human psyche, that are so good that they can even predict the events of tomorrow's newspapers. They're used at the highest levels now in our government, these supercomputers that are being built with these very straps. When a strap is coupled with this IC assembly, it usually resembles a very thin metallic bow tie. Millions of these are tied together, and they just keep simply adding straps, and it allows them for making easier handle of the very small ICs, and the conductive surface area makes connecting the circuits easier and more reliable. These methods vastly increase the amount of ICs that can be processed, increasing throughput and lowering cost, because you've got to be able to afford them for Christmas. You just have to. You've got to have this new tech. Just, of course, so you can have all these worthless gadgets that will not work at all, and their only true value is to educate you just enough so that the deception will work and the devil is counting on it. You got me? Okay, maybe. Now, me personally, I grew up a Baptist, but I have converted. I'm a Quaker now. I'm a Quaker man. I'm not a primitive one, and I am a conservative Quaker in conservative Quakerism. It's not Amish for sure, but you have to admire the Amish for one thing. For sure, they won't be deceived when they see the things that will be more like the Africans with a Coke bottle. Now, my military contacts tell me that we need to look in this direction. If we want the truth, I ask, General Franks, what direction is this? And this is what I was told, folks. You're about to hear it right now. 1973, you're going to have to investigate this yourself. In 1973, encounter is perhaps the earliest suggestion that the U.S. government was involved in extraterrestrials. That year, Robert Eminger and Alan Shander of Los Angeles, California, were in contact with officials at Norton Air Force Base in order to make a documentary film. Eminger and Sandler report that Air Force officials, including President Nixon himself, suggested incorporating UFO information into the documentary, including its centerpiece, genuine footage of a 1971 UFO landing at Holloman Air Force Base in New Mexico. Furthermore, says Eminger, it was given a tour of Holloman Air Force Base and was shown where officials conferred with these real extraterrestrial biological entities, or EBTEs. Now, this was supposedly not the first time the United States had met these aliens. As Eminger reported that his U.S. military sources had been monitoring signals, that's right, you thought SETI was doing this. That's not completely true. They don't really know because the government has been indeed in contact with them from a alien group which they were very unfamiliar with at the time. And did our ET guests know anything about them? The ET said they were coming soon in force to force disclosure. If not given before, we had wiped ourselves out with nuclear war. That's what the alien said. This was a well-placed lie right from the very minions of Satan who had this all planned out very, very well. No film was ever presented, however, was it made. The documentary itself, however, was released in '74. It was shortened. Much of it hit the cutting room floor. It was called The UFOs Past, Present, and Future. You can look that up. It's on YouTube. It's narrated by Rod Sterling even. The alleged Holloman UFO landing was discussed in the documentary, and it was depicted full of many different illustrations. Now, ladies and gentlemen, make no mistake. We have been indeed contacted already. Don't let anybody fool you. Don't say that we haven't been contacted, that we don't really have full disclosure. I'm giving you full disclosure right now. So let's get back to the Von Braun thing and the tapes. And now I'm going to go ahead and release some of this and more in part 2 of our show next week on the WPN on KW Radio. So I want you to tune in. I want you to hear this. It is important for you to understand how you are being deceived. There was a gentleman by the name of Nick Cook, an aviation investigative journalist for Jane's Information Group. Many people have heard of Jane's on the internet. It studies the military. He is a researcher and researcher of this book called The $1 Billion Secret, and author of The Hunt for Zero Point Energy. Claims to have uncovered documentary evidence that top U.S. secret defense industry technology has been developed by government-backed defense industry programs, military-industrial complex, beginning in the 1940s, using research conducted by Nazi scientists during World War II and recovered by Allied military intelligence in diverse places. One of those we discussed in our last show, Antarctica, and why it's now off limits for the next 35 years. According to John Kerry, that is now the law of the land. And they have put in weapons to enforce that no one goes to the Ross Sea or anywhere near Antarctica so that they can't see these things that are going on. They've still got to hide them. They've still got to hide them. They have no place to hide these things anymore. Too many people have seen them. So now they're doing it in Antarctica. So then taken to the U.S. and they developed further with collaboration of the same former German scientists at top secret facilities established at White Sands, New Mexico, and later now called Area 51, allegedly resulting in production of real-world prototype operational supersonic craft actually tested and used in clandestine military exercises. Now I'm going to stop right there and explain some of that. There was a gentleman who, he was 15 years old, and he you can go look this up. I don't have his name right in front of me, It is a true story. He fought in the American Civil War at age 15. He actually did that. And later shows him at the age of 100, that's right, climbing aboard a F-86 fighter jet, taking a ride aboard a U.S. supersonic fighter jet. Now you think about that advance in technology. From the Civil War, one man fought in the Civil War with muskets, now riding a jet aircraft. That really happened. These advances are real. All these other developments that are incorporated later into spy aircraft, and they were tasked with overflying hostile countries, now developed into all this space war and Ronald Reagan's Star Wars program, all these other things. Now, let's get into the meat of this, the actual von Braun disclosure, what you've all been waiting for. Werner von Braun, after Roswell, we had so many parts, I'm quoting him now. After Roswell, we had so many parts and pieces of things we knew nothing about. Of metal that could do things we had never seen in the history of our planet. That's a pretty awesome statement. Metal that we could not make ourselves, and writing on some of it that we could not decipher. I'm sure you've seen pieces of metal with strange alien calligraphy on it. He goes on to say that I seen then the aliens and the bodies from Roswell. They were tiny and fragile, and one was alive. And he talked furiously for hours before it too also died. Also, he says these things can do things to your mind, and they are dangerous, and that they have an agenda. But worse is the agenda that we are putting into place to keep the knowledge secret. This is on his deathbed confession. They are truly demons, he adds. This is from a Nazi. Nazi are telling you that this is truly demons when you're not going to believe it from a Christian man. I'm telling you right now, he said, they are truly demons, he adds. I was in meetings, he says, with shadows and figures that were more powerful than presidents. And we will have soon 3 stages in our future that were discussed. Want you to listen closely. First, the technology that we have made into monster weapons. We've done that already. Number 2, terror all over the world to confuse the masses. Well, what are we looking at now? And last, they plan to make an invasion so the world will come together under a one world government to either fight them or make peace with them. Deathbed confession. Come back for more part 2 of Alien Disclosure. My name is Mars Hoffman. I am host of the Watcher's Prophecy News on KW Radio. Look it up. Your redemption draweth nigh.